Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore fix some of the problems Crimes of Grindelwald brought up? Before we get started and talking about this film, this will be a spoiler-filled review. So if you haven't seen Fantastic Beasts: Secrets of Dumbledore or are trying to avoid spoilers, don't watch this video. Come back once you've seen the film and come and watch it then, because we will be talking in detail about what happens in the film, talking about plenty of spoilers in the film, and kind of going over some things that were great about the film, but also some gripes of the film as well. Off the bat, I just want to say, I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was well put together. In comparison to Crimes of Grindelwald, I feel like it was much more linear. It was easier to follow. It didn't feel quite so complex or confusing. You had some information dropped at you, but it wasn't so much that your head felt reeling and you would try to keep up the action whilst also trying to understand what the hell you just heard. So I feel like it learned a lot from its predecessor. It learned what not to do, and kind of hits a nice middle ground between the greatness that was Fantastic Beasts and the poorness that was Crimes of Grindelwald. So I have three main gripes about this film. The first one, which is the one that probably everyone is still talking about and was talking about from Crimes of Grindelwald: why is Minerva McGonagall in this film? Importantly, she'd be like a kid or a toddler in the timeline of these films, which means she shouldn't be there, which means she's only there for fan service. Now, I kind of forgave it in Crimes of Grindelwald because I was like, maybe it's a relative, maybe it's her aunt, it just so happened to teach at Hogwarts, and she just followed in the path of her ancestors, and I was well on board to accept that. But in this film, they really put the nail in the coffin for themselves by directly calling her Minerva. There's also been many chats with the actress who played her ahead of the film during the premiere, talking about how she studied Maggie Smith's performance with her wand and how she held the wand and stuff, really reinforcing the fact that that is Minerva McGonagall, the head of Gryffindor House when Harry Potter goes to school. The problem with doing something like this is, okay, firstly, it's just fan service. That's all it is. It doesn't bring anything. It doesn't add anything. If she was called Polly Lobstoffin, no one would have cared. It wouldn't have brought or taken away anything from the story. So firstly, it's just fan service, which is irritating when it brings nothing to the story. When it brings something to the story, it's a cool, oh my god, that fits. I.e., the weird monster thingy that fights Theseus and Newt in the cave, or the jail cave, I can't remember what it's called. But that thing, when they use the port key, and we'll get onto that later, to get to Hogwarts, and then it drops off of Theseus, it's somehow still alive, and it slithers into the lake, that could be the giant squid in the lake, and that could be how it came to be in the lake. And I went mad when I saw that. I haven't heard anybody talking about that, but when I saw that, I was like, oh my god, is that how the giant squid gets in the lake? And I thought that was a really cool tie-in. It's a 2-second clip, if not a touch more. It's such a small thing, but it's that little teeny nod, and that is where fan service works so well, when it works canonically into your story, when it answers a question that you didn't even know you wanted answering. That just works really well. Could have had Professor Dippet as the headmaster show up. That would have been a cooler fan service reference, because that is something that is established. He is the headmaster before Dumbledore. So it would have been cool to see their relationship and kind of how Dumbledore maybe gets the position of headmaster after Dippet retires. That would have been a cooler inclusion in my mind, and a more worthy inclusion in my mind. Having McGonagall there, which in your own established canon doesn't work. It's just confusing and irritating. Gripe 2, which follows quite nicely from this, is an improper use of things we've seen used before. This is actually one of Cursed Child's biggest problems, is its improper use of the time turners. And this is a whole different rant for a whole different time, and I'm sure we'll get there. But basically, to the TLDR of this, time turner use in Cursed Child creates alternate realities, which in Prisoner of Azkaban, when the time turner is originally introduced, it is established that once you use the time turner, that you always use the time turner, so the outcome of your actions are always the actions that were performed. Therefore, you go back in time, you've already gone back in time. Your future self has already gone back in time. There is never a time what you did when you went back in time didn't happen. And as confusing as that is, it does get rid of alternate realities. It does get rid of the butterfly effect. So when Cursed Child comes along, it's like, oh, but if we go back in time and change things, we'll get a completely new reality. That breaks a canonical use of this artifact. And it's really frustrating to people when you break your own universe laws. I.e., Porkies now teleport us to Floo Powder Network. Cool, didn't know that happened. Porkies also can just work whenever you need them to, rather than being preset at a certain time or to be used as a portkey on next touch. Well, there's another way to use it, but I can't remember what it is right now. But it's certainly not at a whim. Whenever I fancy it being a portkey, now it's a portkey. That's called plot convenience. You also have things that work differently within the same film. The Blood Pact. At the start of the film, we're given a nice little explanation as to this is how the Blood Pact works. If I, a person who is part of the Blood Pact, think about hurting the person who I made the Blood Pact with, the Blood Pact basically tries to kill me. But then at the end, Grindlewald tries to kill, technically not Dumbledore, but tries to kill, sends with intent of killing, and Dumbledore sends to protect, and somehow the Blood Pact isn't like, yo, Grindy, we gotta kind of come and take you out now, you shouldn't have done that. The Blood Pact's like, I don't know, I'll break now, because convenient would be the time for me to break. Whereas the other ones have fit nicely into the lore of Harry Potter as a whole, and things that even that Harry struggled with in the original series were being seen again in the Fantastic Beasts or whatever as things that were still being struggled with. So that continued across. But now there are things that Harry struggled with that apparently 70 years earlier, a Newton crew were like, let's just yada yada this and everything's fine and it's super easy for us. Gripe number 3, which follows quite nicely on from that point, is the yada yada effect. So much happens in this film with zero explanation. You're painting Dumbledore, rightfully, as an extremely powerful wizard who is able to do extremely powerful things. And most of those things he does, we can get along with it's Dumbledore, just go with it. And I'm okay with that. But there's certain things that do not make sense and get zero explanation, and it's infuriating. I.e., at the very beginning of the film, when he's having a cup of tea with Grindlewald and they're just having a little natter about things that go on. How is that even happening? Are they actually there? Did he teleport there? Why does the cafe burst into flames when Grindlewald leaves? Is it all in his head? Is it real? Is it real because it's in his head? Is there some kind of telepathic... Like, when I first saw it, when he stirs the tea, it looks like he puts something in the tea. And what I kind of wanted was him to have a sip of the tea, and then we're like, right, he's using some magical, neurological link. I don't need a full explanation, right? But I need some kind of this is what's happening. Or even have him, like, when you zoom back out and he's standing there playing with the Blood Pact, have him near the pensieve, right? So that was a pensieve moment. He's been there, he's re-remembering something he's already done. Although that doesn't quite work because he has the Blood Pact. Importantly, it doesn't make sense how he does this, or if it's real, or why it happens, or where it's happening, or if it's even happening. And there's no explanation to it. Now, there is a kind of running theme, and it reiterates them when Jacob imagines Queenie in the bakery, where there's a prolonged audio, so when Dumbledore taps his spoon on the cup of tea, or when the bell tingles when you open the door to go into the bakery, the audio for those dings sustain. And that, after you've seen the Jacob thing, kind of is like, oh, right, a sustained audio like that must mean an imagination, a thought going on in your head that isn't real, but you're imagining a scenario. And that makes a little bit more sense. And it does make sense that the conversation between Dumbledore and Grindelwald at the beginning is a made-up conversation, is something that's happening in Dumbledore's head that he's imagining. How he imagines if he had the chance to sit and commune with Grindelwald, how it would go down. Although bursting into flames at the end doesn't really matter. It doesn't really make sense even. How the Blood Pact broke was another yada yada moment. I had this whole theory that because it's established 3 times that the same blood that runs in Albus runs in Credence, because Credence is a Dumbledore, so they both have Dumbledore blood. So I had this whole theory that it's a blood pact, which means it's not Albus Dumbledore himself, it's Albus Dumbledore's blood, right? Which technically, if we're gonna make this theory work, technically would mean that Grindelwald can't move against any Dumbledore, and no Dumbledore can move against Grindelwald. Dumbledores can move against Dumbledores, but not against Grindelwald, because of the Blood Pact. This is the problem when you bring it into blood. Like, the unbreakable vow is so simple. It is a vow made between 2 people, and if you break it, you die. That is why it's called Unbreakable. It is so simple and so easy to understand. The blood pact, when you start bringing blood into it and you start reoccurring this theme of his blood, we share the same blood, his blood is in my veins, my blood is in his veins. You open up the door of, well, technically then, Grindelwald can't move against any of the Dumbledores. It would have then made sense when Grindelwald moves to kill Credence, a Dumbledore, and a Dumbledore protects that spell, that the blood pact would go, what the hell, bang. And it would actually make way more sense that that was why it broke. Because technically, Grindelwald is moving against a Dumbledore. It's not the Dumbledore that made the pact, but it is a Dumbledore sharing the blood that's in the pact. And I just think that would have made more sense if that was the route down it goes. But literally, Dumbledore's words are, to quote, let's call it fate. Basically, the writers went, I don't know, but we needed to get rid of it because he's got to fight him in 15 odd years' time. So we needed this thing to not be here anymore. And it just feels like if you're going to introduce this thing, it's definitely a MacGuffin. It's just a thing that kind of powers part of the plot, sort of. You could take the blood pact out of the entire film and like just had Dumbledore's whole, I don't want to move against him because to me he's my soulmate, I love him so much, I couldn't bear to think of moving against him. Or even have it such as simple as Grindelwald's like, if you move against me, I'm going to tell everyone this was your idea too, and you gave me the idea. And there's this underlying threat. Dumbledore can't move against him because he's worried that Grindelwald will reveal Dumbledore was also so up for this plan. And that's such a more interesting, it gives, like, it kind of shows cowardice from Dumbledore. Love that. A whole new level for him to play with. But it shows this even deeper, darker version of Grindelwald that's like, yeah, I 100% manipulated you for my own good. And I am so going to exploit that. And it just brings these additional layers to these characters that I think would be so much more interesting than I can't fight him because of this brooch. There's so much yada yada, just go with it. There's so much non-explanation about how things happen. Like the Deluminator Mirrorverse and the Snowfall teleportation to said Mirrorverse with Credence. How? And if you don't need the Deluminator to get into that scenario, why do you need the Deluminator to get out of that scenario? I would have been way okay if they'd have just been like, yep, the Deluminator does this. It's just a power that only Dumbledore knew it did, and it enables him to take them to this special version of reality that looks real, and the other person doesn't realize it's like a mirrorverse, but any damage or effects they do inside that doesn't affect the real world. I'm actually okay with that. And this is again where it is inconsistent in its own film. Because at the end of the film, when the blood pact does what it does and breaks slowly, and there's this fight between Dumbledore and Grindelwald going on, we seem to be back in that kind of place, because when they come out of that, Dumbledore is moved like he does with Credence, and he's then walking away, but there's obviously been this battle go down, but it doesn't seem like anyone else around them, or even anyone knows it's even happened. I don't know what that would even look like from the outside. Importantly, neither do we. And importantly, in that moment, you don't see Dumbledore use the Deluminator. So it's inconsistent in its own film. A couple of other things I do want to talk about quickly are some plot points that don't make any sense now, and start to kind of fight with this. It should be, and you should be seeing it as canonically Harry Potter, but they do start to fight with that idea. Now we have an answer to who Credence is. He is Aberforth's son, not Albus's brother. Which, trust me, I rolled my eyes at first hearing it, but then, like, I gave it 5 minutes, I was like, do you know what? This is better than him being some long-lost sibling that Dumbledore decided when he was being really honest with Harry, he just wasn't going to mention. The only problem it does suffer is that I do believe, we've had 4 years between these films, there should have been 2, and I do believe that there was a massive rewrite between the Secrets of Dumbledore we saw versus the original version of this film. Because there is a lot that gets talked about during Crimes of Grindelwald that is just completely ignored, i.e. the whole prophecy about a child with wings from the water, and the fact that the Secret of Dumbledore's trailers have a phoenix made of water behind it. I think there was possibility to completely, like, say, you know, Grindelwald is lying to get you on side. He's lying to tell you that Dumbledore, Albus, betrayed you, so you want to kill him, so you have a reason to kill him, because Grindelwald, can't kill him because of the blood pact, but Grindelwald wants him dead, so that there's no potential threat of Dumbledore moving forwards into the future. that makes a lot of sense why Grindelwald would do that. I kind of wish they'd have made that all a lie and Credence wasn't a Dumbledore, but I suppose, like I said, of the ways around it they could have gone, this is something. What I feel like happened was they were gonna go for this secret sibling line, and the fan backlash after that film was so large, they were like, yo, we can't do this. And it feels like there was a lot of that, like the whole prophecy about the baby and wings of water doesn't even get mentioned in this film, doesn't even get referenced in this film. It's almost like they want to pretend it never happened. You've also got Grindelwald's hunt for the Deathly Hallows. Completely gone. He apparently doesn't care about those. He wants to take a pause to become wizarding muggle. I don't remember what it's called. I can't remember. And to be fair, that's not actually ever made super clear. So just do a little sidetrack here. When we're introduced to that, Newt and Theseus and Lally, I think it's Lally. Newt and Theseus and Lally and Jacob go to the tea ceremony, whatever that is, at the German Ministry of Magic. Theseus has already made point that the Ministry of Magic aren't making comment about which side of this election they would prefer. And when I first saw it, until they go to the Himalayas, the place on the top of the mountain where the election's being held with the Chillin, I genuinely thought the election was about the new German Minister for Magic. And that would make sense why the British Ministry for Magic wouldn't really care, because they don't really have a say. However, this is like the big Wizardmore, like, supreme leader of the wizards. I kind of think the Ministry of Magic in Britain would kind of care. And also, why is it seemingly only people in Berlin who get a chance to vote on this thing? Doesn't make any sense. I don't know why they didn't just go like, we're electing a new Minister of Magic for Germany. Grindelwald has got the current German Minister of Magic on side. The current German Minister of Magic is going to appease him of his crimes and allow him to run for German Minister for Magic. It's still a position of power, and it would have like a whole country on side, which he seemingly has. The Chillin is very powerful. Wizards are very easy to sway if there's a magical, cute little beast bowing at people. But yeah, back to the point I was making. There's just a lot of threads of stories that were brought up in Crimes of Grindelwald that are completely gone. The Deathly Hallows search. Nagini, completely gone. Tina just doesn't care that her sister's gone to the dark side. It's apparently more important she stays in America to be an Auror. When in the previous two films, she has happily defied the American Ministry of Magic and done what she needed to do for this case. Even in the second one, she was kind of working on her own, doing her own thing. I appreciate it's a promotion, but Theseus is okay to come along from the British Ministry of Magic with the same position. So why Tina isn't involved is extremely confusing and doesn't really make a lot of sense when she's been such a pivotal character in the first two films. The other thing to talk about super quickly, because I am rambling now, is the fact of what this does, the Aberforth strain of this film, what that does for the greater Harry Potter story. Now, Aberforth's biggest grievance with Dumbledore is that he wanted to gallivant around the world with Grindelwald. He wanted to go off and be the supreme leaders of the wizarding world for the greater good with Grindelwald and abandon Ariana, his sister who was ill, who needed looking after. He wanted to give up on all of his familiar responsibilities to go off and travel around the world. And that was Aberforth's biggest issue with him. Now, this whole introduction of Credence being Aberforth's son kind of puts Aberforth in the very same situation. Because the fact they're communicating through the mirrors means that Aberforth is aware Credence exists. The words, forgive me, do you know what it feels like to be alone? I want to come home. Right? They know who each other are. Somehow. Clearly. Which also then doesn't make sense how Credence... it's such a patchy bit of narrative. And I don't mean to be hampering on about bad things, because I didn't really enjoy the film. But this is a patchy bit of narrative. Importantly, you basically have a situation where Aberforth gives up familial responsibilities for whatever reason he deems it. The one thing he always held against Albus. And it's a whole thing that's brought up in the 7th Harry Potter book when this all starts to unveil. When Harry meets Aberforth and they have a whole conversation about it. The biggest problem he had was that Dumbledore wanted to give up on a responsibility that was his to bear to go and do this bad thing with Grindelwald. And it's now like, how can Aberforth hold that against Dumbledore, Albus, when Aberforth kind of did the same thing? I also 100%, when Credence and Dumbledore are having their fight, and Dumbledore's like, I'm so sorry, we didn't know. I 100% thought that Credence was somehow going to be Ariana reincarnated. And I'd have kind of preferred that. But like I said, overall, it had its plot holes, it has its gripes. When you start to untangle the mess of it, it's a lot messier than maybe it is on first watching. But I think in terms of watching, it's very linear, it's very easy to follow. You get a lot of information, but it doesn't feel like a brain dump like Crimes of Grindelwald did, and you don't feel like your head's swirling and you're trying to keep up with things and things don't make sense. And from the Harry Potter lore, you know, things certainly don't add up versus, and then you're at the end of the film and you just feel totally confused and angry. This at least was linear. Jacob was hilarious. One of my favourite characters in the film. Eddie Redmayne knocked it out of the park again as Newt. I feel like all the characters felt very complete. There'll be a whole ass debate about whether or not the Chillin should have bowed to Dumbledore. I genuinely wish it would have bowed to either Newt or Jacob. More so Jacob. I thought it was going to bow to Jacob, and I'd have preferred it to bow to Jacob, because then there's this whole kind of, oh my gosh, a muggle is being seen as super worthy and super pure-hearted by this mythical creature that we rely a lot on to make this very important decision, which is confusing because the whole reason Grindelwald gets to stand in the first place is because before you know he's working with Grindelwald, but the whole idea is that the public get their chance to speak, but they'll make sure that Grindelwald loses, so that when he loses, the public is like, well, guess he's not our biggest voice, we at least had our say, we were allowed to have our say, and it didn't go our way. Such as diplomatic politics. But then they scrap all of that and go, yo, this little magical beast that we haven't used for centuries is going to make the decision for us, and its vote's going to stand. It's not even like it made its decision and then it was like, now it's up to you. The Chillin has spoken, you may now cast your vote. It was literally like, oh, the Chillin is chosen? Great. Guess it's Grindelwald then. Or, oh, now it's chosen the woman, Santos. Guess it's Santos now. Sweet. When you start to deep dive and you start to dig into the narrative itself, it does get a bit messy, but importantly, off the offset, watching it was fun, the characters felt complete, the world felt magical, a lot of things were yada-yada through and you just kind of had to accept that, but all in all, I really did enjoy this film, and I'm so glad it's out, and I'm so glad we get to see it now. Whether they'll make the next two is a massive question mark, because I think it is going to rely a lot on box office success. The author is doing a very good job of destroying their own franchise and making it not a profitable IP, because lots of people now are boycotting it for silly comments being made that I certainly don't agree with and don't stand by, but this universe is so much of my childhood and I have such a passion for it that I won't ever give it up. However, I do not agree with the author in any way, shape or form. I'm pretty sure I've made that clear before on the channel, but just put the line in the sand. So not only is the author destroying their own franchise, you've also got box office not successful in terms of comparison against others, and people like Warner Brothers are not going to want to keep putting in billions to produce these projects for them to not turn over a great profit. So whether we ever see 4 and 5 of what this should have been is debatable. In my opinion, they should have never kept it as a Fantastic Beasts series. The first one should have been Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and the next one shouldn't have had Fantastic Beasts in the title at all. I think they pigeonhole themselves into having to have some kind of mythical creature at the heart of it. Whereas I feel like, take that element out, have it if you want it. Like, the Chillin worked very well in this film, I think, but have that mythical beast element if you want it, but also don't feel you have to rely on it. And I feel like that, I mean, you see the title cards and Fantastic Beasts get smaller and smaller to a point where you may as well just take it off. But it doesn't feel like it's about Fantastic Beasts anymore. It feels like it's about the Grindelwald Dumbledore fight. And I kind of feel like that's more where people want to pay attention. They don't really care about catching beasts and all this stuff. Like I said, the characters are phenomenal, and I really hope, if anything further comes from this series, we do continue to see them. The 4th film isn't even in script or development at the moment, so whether we even see any more from this franchise, who knows? It'll be a shame if we don't, because I would enjoy to see some more, but there you go. Finally, this film does, speaking on that, tie itself off very nicely. It is left. You could leave the story here. Most of the questions are answered. Questions that aren't answered are left open for theorizing or whatever. It's very clear to see that this would then lead to Dumbledore then starting to move against Grindelwald, leading to their fight in 1945. Newt leaves it with saying the line basically, if you ever need my help again, give us a holler. It has been left in a way that would very easily see the end of this as a trio of films rather than a quintet of films. If you've seen Fantastic Beasts and where to find them, please let me know down in the coffee pot what your thoughts were, whether you enjoyed it, whether you didn't, whether the tangled mess of confusion turning into canonical, whether it can really be seen as canonical anymore, if it's moving too far away from established lore from the source material, whether that starts to make it kind of stand on its own. Let me know all your thoughts, feelings, and everything down in the coffee pot below, and I will carry on the conversation with you there. But for now, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It's been an absolute blast as always. If you enjoyed this video, go show that like button some magical love. And if you want to support the channel, go hit subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss next time I upload a video. Stay awesome, and I will see you all in the next video! Still forgotten things I wanted to talk about as well. This is the second time of filming because I forgot so much in the first one. But I very likely still forgot things I wanted to say. So do carry on the conversation with me down in the coffee pot.